Jack Carter had been in some pretty bad situations before, but this was a new level of ridiculous. One minute, he was scavenging for ship parts in an abandoned sector of space. The next, his small beaten-up starship was hit by an unidentified energy pulse, sending him spiraling down onto a strange alien planet. His controls were fried, the engines sputtered, and he had just enough time to shout, "Oh, come on," before crashing into a dense jungle. The landing was rough. Smoke poured from the wreckage as Jack groaned, crawling out of his ship. His jacket was torn, his face was covered in dirt, and he was completely lost. "Great," he muttered, looking around at the towering alien trees and glowing blue vines. "Another fine mess, Jack. Real smooth." Before he could even check his gear, a loud battle cry echoed through the jungle. Jack spun around just in time to see a figure running toward him, a woman, chased by 3 armored warriors wielding curved, glowing weapons. She was outnumbered, but she fought fiercely, dodging and counterattacking with incredible skill. Still, Jack could tell she was tiring. Her movements were slowing, her breaths coming harder. Jack wasn't a hero. He was a survivor, but something about the way the warriors closed in on her made his gut twist. His instincts kicked in. Jack grabbed the first thing he could find, a metal panel from his broken ship, and hurled it at the closest attacker. It smacked the warrior straight in the head, sending him crashing to the ground. Everyone froze. The second warrior turned, confused. Jack improvised, grabbing a piece of piping and swinging it like a bat. It connected with a loud sturak kick, knocking the attacker out cold. The last warrior hesitated, eyes darting between Jack and the woman. Jack could tell he was considering his odds. "Yeah, buddy, I'd run too," Jack said. The warrior growled, but instead of fighting, he fled into the jungle, disappearing into the shadows. Jack turned back, expecting to see a terrified woman, but instead, she stared at him with something far more intense. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then she took a step closer, too close. Jack suddenly felt very aware of how tall she was, how the air between them crackled with some kind of energy. She spoke in a strong, commanding voice, a language Jack didn't understand. "You're welcome," Jack said, holding up his hands. "Look, lady, I don't know what's going on, but I think—" He didn't get to finish, because suddenly the jungle erupted with cheers. Jack spun around, realizing that a whole group of warriors had appeared from the shadows. They were watching him, studying him. One of them, a grizzled older warrior, stepped forward and said something in a deep official tone. The woman's gaze never left Jack. Slowly, her expression shifted, from shock to something else, something unsettling. Then, in front of everyone, she placed a hand over her heart and spoke his name. "Jack Carter." Her voice was serious, final. The older warrior grinned. The others cheered. Jack had no idea what just happened, but he was pretty sure it wasn't good. "Okay," he said slowly. "Why do I feel like I just made a really, really big mistake?" Jack Carter had been in dangerous situations before, but this was something else. The jungle warriors surrounded him, clapping each other on the back, shouting in their alien tongue, and throwing Jack a few approving nods. The woman he had just saved was still staring at him, arms crossed, an unreadable expression on her face. Jack forced a nervous chuckle. "So, what exactly did I just agree to?" The older warrior, the one who had made the announcement, stepped forward and thumped Jack on the back so hard he nearly fell over. The warrior said something in a deep, booming voice, his grin wide. Jack turned to the woman, who still hadn't stopped staring at him. He pointed at himself, me, then at her, you, then at the cheering crowd. "What's all this?" She sighed, then finally spoke in a heavily accented but understandable voice. "You have defeated my attackers. You have defended me in battle. By the laws of my people, we are now bound." Jack blinked. "Bound? You mean like teammates, partners, friends?" Her expression remained firm. Husband and wife. Jack's brain short-circuited. He took a slow step back, shaking his head. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. That can't be right. I was just helping." "It is the law," she said firmly. You fought for me. You won. You are now my consort. Jack ran both hands through his hair, trying to process. That's ridiculous. You don't just marry someone because they threw a metal panel at a guy's head. Her eyes narrowed. Would you prefer I let you fight them again? Jack's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the warriors, big, muscular, well-armed warriors who looked very happy with this new arrangement. He'd definitely lose round 2. He groaned. Okay, fine. Let's say, for argument's sake, that I did accidentally marry you in your culture. He gestured around. How do we, I don't know, undo it? The warriors suddenly stopped cheering. The jungle grew dead silent. Jack had a very bad feeling. The woman tilted her head. There is only one way to dissolve the bond, she said, voice dangerously calm. Great, Jack said. Let's do that. Her next words made his stomach drop. One of us must die. Jack froze. Excuse me. She said it without a hint of humor. If the bond is rejected, it is a great dishonor. There is only one way to erase it. Jack gulped. All right, so staying married doesn't sound so bad. The older warrior nodded approvingly. He learns quickly, he said in their language. Jack put his hands on his hips, exhaling hard. Okay, all right, let's be logical here. Maybe we can just pretend. Fake it. Say we're married, but not actually be married. The woman's expression hardened. I do not lie about such things. Jack groaned again. He was so doomed. Before he could argue further, another warrior burst through the trees. Looking panicked, he shouted something, pointing toward the distant mountains. The woman's expression grew sharp. Jack sighed. I don't suppose he just said, hey, let's all sit down for a nice meal and talk this out. The woman didn't answer. She turned toward Jack, gripping his arm firmly. Come, if you are to be my consort, you must prove yourself worthy. Another battle is coming. Jack let out a long, pained sigh. He had just survived one fight, accidentally gotten married, and now he was being dragged into another battle. Yeah, sure, he muttered. Why not? It's not like I had plans today. Jack barely had time to process his accidental marriage before he was being dragged through the jungle at a breakneck speed. The alien woman, his wife, apparently moved with deadly grace, weaving through the thick trees as if she had lived here all her life. Jack, on the other hand, tripped on every root, ducked too late for every low branch, and nearly fell into a mud pit twice. Could we grunt, slow down, wheeze, just a little? Jack gasped. His wife, who still hadn't given her name, did not slow down. The enemy moves fast, she said over her shoulder. If we do not reach the stronghold before them, they will claim it. Jack wiped sweat from his brow. Right. And what exactly happens if they claim it? She gave him a sharp look. We die. Jack groaned. Of course we do. After a few more minutes of running, and Jack nearly dying from exhaustion, they finally emerged onto a wide cliff overlooking a valley. Below, a fortress of jagged stone stood tall, half hidden by the mist. The warriors around Jack muttered in their own language, gripping their weapons. Jack squinted at the valley. So, how many are we up against? His wife studied the battlefield, then said, At least 50. Jack nearly choked. 50? We've got, 12 people here? 13, she corrected. You are a warrior now. Jack ran a hand down his face. I am so not a warrior. The older warrior, the one who had announced their marriage, clapped Jack on the shoulder. You fought well before. Now you fight for your bonded mate. Jack let out a hollow laugh. Oh, great. No pressure. Before he could protest further, a loud horn blast echoed through the valley. Below, dark figures emerged from the mist, carrying weapons that glowed with red energy. Jack didn't know much about alien combat, but he was pretty sure that was bad. His wife turned to the group. We strike first. Jack's stomach flipped. Wait, we're attacking. She nodded. Unless you wish to die where you stand. Jack groaned. You people really need to work on your pep talks. Before he could object further, the warriors leaped into action. They moved like shadows, sprinting down the cliffside with terrifying speed. Jack, meanwhile, was still standing there, panicking. His wife shot him a sharp look. "Come, husband." Jack nearly tripped over his own feet. Yeah, I'm coming," he muttered. He ran after her, gripping the only weapon they had given him, a short, curved blade that looked ancient but deadly. He had zero clue how to use it. By the time he reached the battlefield, chaos had erupted. Warriors clashed, blades sparking against glowing weapons. Jack barely dodged a strike aimed at his head, stumbling backward with a yelp. "Okay, think, Jack," he muttered to himself. "What's the best strategy for a guy who doesn't know how to sword fight?" A burly enemy warrior lunged at him, swinging a glowing axe. Jack yelped and did the only thing he could think of. He threw a handful of dirt in the guy's face. The enemy stumbled, blinded. Jack immediately kicked his legs out from under him. The warrior crashed to the ground. Jack stared at his hands. That actually worked. His wife appeared beside him, cutting down an enemy with deadly precision. She raised an eyebrow. "You fight." Strangely. Jack smirked. "Hey, if it works, it works." The battle raged on, and somehow Jack survived. His strategy? Absolute chaos. He dodged, tripped enemies, and used whatever he could grab: rocks, dirt, even a helmet that he threw like a frisbee. At one point, he ducked behind his wife as a spear flew past. "Stop using me as a shield," she snapped. "Then stop standing in the perfect shield position," he shot back. She glared at him, but there was something almost amused in her eyes. By the time the battle ended, the enemy had retreated. Jack collapsed onto the ground, panting. His wife stood over him. "You fought well." Jack snorted. "I fought like an idiot." She tilted her head. "Sometimes, that is the best way to win." Jack looked up at her. For the first time, she wasn't just an intimidating warrior. There was a spark of warmth in her gaze. Maybe, just maybe, this whole marriage thing wasn't the worst thing to happen to him. Jack barely had time to process the fact that he was still alive before he was being dragged, again, toward the fortress. The battle was over, and the alien warriors were celebrating their victory. His wife walked beside him, completely unfazed by everything that had just happened. Meanwhile, Jack could barely feel his legs. "Can we talk about how I almost died back there?" he muttered, rubbing his sore arms. She glanced at him. "But you did not die." Jack threw up his hands. "Great, glad we cleared that up." The fortress gates creaked open, revealing a massive hall lit by golden torches. Inside, long tables were filled with food, strange, glowing fruits, roasted meats, and drinks that bubbled like soda but smelled like fire. The warriors cheered as they entered, clapping Jack on the back so hard he nearly fell over. "Eat, drink, and honor the battle," one of them roared. Jack was all for food, but something still bothered him. He turned to his wife, arms crossed. "All right, warrior princess, you want to explain why everyone keeps calling me your husband?" She picked up a goblet and took a sip completely unbothered. "Because you are." Jack choked on air. "I what?" She sighed, as if this should have been obvious. "You saved my life. In my people's customs, that means we are bonded." Jack blinked. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." The warriors around him went silent. Jack suddenly realized that maybe insulting their marriage traditions in a room full of warriors with very sharp weapons was a bad idea. His wife set her goblet down very slowly. "You find our ways foolish." Jack forced out a nervous laugh. "Oh no, not foolish. Just very, different from where I come from." The tension in the room eased slightly, but his wife's eyes stayed sharp. Jack exhaled and rubbed his forehead. "Okay, listen. Back on Earth, people don't get married just because they save each other's lives. That's just common decency." She frowned. "And do your people also ignore fate?" Jack groaned. "Oh great, now fate is involved. What's next? Some ancient prophecy?" His wife gave him a very serious look. "There is an old prophecy." Jack threw up his hands. "Of course there is." Before he could argue more, the older warrior, the one who had first announced their marriage, stood up and raised his cup. "Tonight, we honor Commander Xyra and her new bonded mate." The warriors cheered. Jack blinked. "Wait, Your name is Thyra." She looked at him like he was an idiot. "Yes, I did not tell you." "No, you definitely didn't tell me." Zira simply shrugged. Jack slumped onto a bench and grabbed a plate of food. If he was stuck in this mess, he might as well eat. As he took a bite of something surprisingly good, Thyra sat beside him. "You are unhappy." Jack sighed. "I'm just trying to figure out how my life turned into an alien wedding I didn't sign up for." She studied him for a moment. Then, in a rare show of patience, she said, "In time, you may come to accept it." Jack snorted. "Don't hold your breath." Thyra smirked. "We shall see, husband." Jack nearly choked on his drink. The warriors laughed. The feast continued, and Jack realized he was well and truly doomed. Jack did not wake up in his own bed, mostly because he didn't have one anymore. Instead, he found himself on a strange, oversized cushion, covered in a blanket made of some silky alien fabric. The room around him was dimly lit, with walls carved from smooth stone and glowing blue symbols pulsing across them. For a brief, blissful moment, Jack thought maybe it was all a dream. Then the door slid open, and Thyra walked in. Jack groaned and flopped back down. Nope, not a dream. Still married to an alien warrior princess. "You are awake," Thyra noted, stepping inside. She carried a tray of food, setting it down beside him. Jack sat up. "You know, on Earth, usually when two people get married, the guy at least gets a heads up first." Thyra raised an eyebrow. "You were warned." "Oh yeah, totally. A bunch of warriors screaming in a language I don't understand. Crystal clear communication." Jack huffed, grabbing a piece of fruit from the tray. "Anyway, none of that matters. Because I'm leaving." Thyra crossed her arms. "You cannot." Jack paused mid-bite. "What do you mean I can't?" She gave him a calm, matter-of-fact look. "You are my bonded mate. You belong here." Jack laughed nervously. "Yeah, see, that's the thing. I don't belong here. I belong on Earth, with normal food, normal gravity, and people who don't decide to get married in the middle of a battlefield." Thyra took a slow step toward him. "Do you truly wish to leave?" Jack hesitated. Did he? Of course he did, right? Sure, this place was strange, and the customs were ridiculous, but it wasn't bad. The food was good, the technology was way more advanced than anything on Earth, and despite everything, he had to admit, Thyra was kind of fascinating. Still, he had to try. "Yeah," he finally said. "I mean, I appreciate the hospitality, but I've got my own life to get back to." Thyra studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Very well, I will arrange a ship for you." Jack blinked. "Wait, really?" She nodded. "But first, you must complete a departure ritual." Jack narrowed his eyes. "Let me guess. It involves fighting something." Thyra smirked. "You learn quickly." Jack groaned. "Oh, come on." Less than an hour later, Jack found himself standing in a massive stone arena, surrounded by cheering warriors. He had no armor, no weapons, and definitely no plan. Thyra stood at the edge of the arena, watching as an enormous beast was released from a metal gate. It had 6 legs, glowing red eyes, and far too many teeth. Jack stared in horror. "You have got to be kidding me." Thyra called out, "If you defeat it, you are free to go." Jack threw up his hands. "Oh, fantastic. All I have to do is fight the alien nightmare creature with my bare hands." "Great plan." The beast snarled and charged. Jack ran. The warriors laughed as he dodged behind a pillar, trying to figure out how not to die. Then, suddenly, he saw something, a metal spear lying in the sand. Jack lunged for it just as the beast pounced. He rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding getting crushed. "Okay, buddy," Jack muttered, gripping the spear. "Let's see how tough you really are." The beast snarled and charged again. Jack waited, then dodged at the last second, jamming the spear into its side. The creature roared in pain, staggering backward. Jack didn't stop. He yanked the spear free and struck again, this time hitting something vital. With one final shudder, the beast collapsed. Silence. Then, deafening cheers. Jack stood there, panting. His heart was racing, his hands shaking. Zyra approached, looking impressed. "You fought well." Jack glared at her. "Can I go now?" She smirked. "We shall see." Jack groaned. Somehow, he knew this wasn't over yet. Jack stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard, his hand still gripping the spear. The massive beast lay motionless behind him, its deep growl finally silenced. The crowd of alien warriors roared with approval, pounding their weapons against the stone floor in a thunderous rhythm. Jack wasn't sure if they were cheering for him or for the spectacle, but either way, he was alive. Zyra approached, her expression unreadable. "You have proven your strength." Jack wiped sweat from his brow. "Great, so that means I can go home, right?" She tilted her head. "There is one more matter to discuss." Jack groaned. "Of course there is." Zyra turned to the crowd and spoke in her native tongue. The warriors listened in silence, their expressions shifting from amusement to serious contemplation. Jack did not like this at all. Finally, Zyra looked back at him. "You may leave, but first, you must break the bond." Jack hesitated. "The bond?" She nodded. "The ritual of marriage is not simply words. It is a spiritual link. To break it, you must complete the severance ceremony." Jack sighed. "Why do I feel like that's going to be way harder than it sounds?" Zyra studied him for a moment before speaking softly. "Because it is." Later that evening, Jack found himself in a grand ceremonial hall, standing before a massive glowing altar. The room was lit by floating blue flames, casting flickering shadows across the intricate carvings on the walls. At the far end of the room stood a group of alien elders, watching him with piercing, unreadable eyes. Zyra stood beside him, her expression unreadable. Jack shifted uncomfortably. "Okay, let's do this severance thing so I can catch the next space bus out of here." An elder stepped forward, raising a hand. "The bond of marriage is sacred. It cannot be undone with words alone. You must prove your will." Jack blinked. "Prove it how?" The elder motioned to the altar. "Place your hand upon the stone. If your heart truly seeks to leave, the bond will dissolve. But if there is doubt, the bond will hold." Jack stared at the stone. That sounded way too mystical for his liking. He glanced at Zyra. She stood tall, emotionless, but something in her posture felt tense. Jack swallowed. "So I just put my hand on this rock and think real hard about wanting to leave." The elder nodded. Jack sighed and reached out, placing his hand on the smooth, cold surface of the altar. Nothing happened. Jack frowned and pressed harder. Still nothing. He glanced at the elders. "Bud, did it work?" The elder shook his head. "The bond remains." Jack froze. "Wait, what?" Zyra spoke softly. "It means you do not truly wish to leave." Jack's heart pounded. That couldn't be right. He wanted to go home. He wanted to get back to Earth. Right. But deep down, a small voice whispered the truth. Earth was home. But here, he was part of something bigger. He had fought alongside warriors, defied alien traditions, and somehow, found himself drawn to Zyra in ways he didn't fully understand. Jack pulled his hand away. "No, this thing must be broken. Let me try again." He placed his hand back down. Nothing. Panic started creeping in. No, that's not possible." Zyra finally spoke. "You cannot lie to yourself, Jack." Jack turned to face her, his mind racing. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to leave." Zyra took a slow step toward him. "Then why does the bond remain?" Jack had no answer. And deep down, he wasn't sure he wanted one. Jack stood frozen, staring at the altar. The cold truth settled over him like a weight. He couldn't break the bond. Not because of some magic stone, not because of alien customs, but because he didn't truly want to leave. Zyra remained silent, watching him with unreadable eyes. The elders exchanged glances, but said nothing. Jack exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "All right, so, hypothetically speaking, what happens if I don't break the bond?" One of the elders stepped forward. "Then you remain bound to Zyra as her mate, forever." Jack's stomach twisted. Forever? That was a big word. He turned to Xyra. And you're just okay with that? She hesitated for the first time. The bond was meant to unite us in duty, but I will not force you to stay. Jack frowned. Yeah, but that's the problem. I don't know if I want to leave. Xyra studied him carefully. Then perhaps the question is not what you should do, but what you truly feel. Jack felt like his brain was melting. He wasn't great with emotions, especially when they involved life-changing decisions, alien customs, and warrior princesses. He sighed. Look, I know we got off to a crazy start, but you're not bad to be around. Xyra raised a brow. Not bad. Jack groaned. You know what I mean. You're strong, smart, and honestly, kind of terrifying, but in a cool way. A small smile touched Xyra's lips. And you are reckless, stubborn, and unpredictable. Yet, I do not dislike your presence. Jack crossed his arms. Wow, high praise. She took a step closer. You have fought for your survival. You have proven your worth. Yet you hesitate, not out of fear, but because your heart is torn between two worlds. Jack swallowed. She was right. He had spent his whole life wanting adventure, craving something more than the ordinary life Earth had to offer. And now, standing here on an alien world, tied to a woman who challenged him at every turn, he had to ask himself, wasn't this what he had always wanted? Jack exhaled. So if I stay, what happens next? Xyra's expression grew serious. You would be my mate in truth. You would live among my people, fight by my side, and share in my burdens. Jack smirked. And let me guess, there's a whole new set of impossible trials waiting for me. Xyra gave a small nod. Of course. Jack laughed. Of course there were. He looked around the hall, at the elders, the warriors, and finally, back at Xyra. Maybe this wasn't the life he planned, but it was a life he could choose. And maybe that choice wasn't so bad after all. Jack took a deep breath and met Xyra's gaze. All right, princess. Let's see where this crazy road takes us. Xyra's eyes gleamed. Then it is decided. The elders raised their staffs in unison, the blue flames in the room flaring brighter, as if sealing his fate. Jack couldn't help but smile. What's the worst that could happen? The ceremony ended with a deafening cheer from the warriors. Jack wasn't sure if they were happy for him or just excited to see how long he'd survive. Either way, there was no turning back now. Xyra stepped beside him, standing tall and proud. The blue flames around them flickered, casting shadows over her sharp, regal features. You have chosen to stay, she said. This is your path now. Jack sighed. Yeah, I guess it is. He turned to her, a small smirk creeping onto his lips. So, does this mean I get my own royal quarters, or do I have to sleep in a training hall with the warriors? Xyra raised an eyebrow. You are my mate. You will stay by my side. Jack coughed. Wait, by your side, as in? She nodded once, her expression unwavering. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. No pressure, huh? A warrior stomped forward, grinning. A celebration is in order. Let the feast begin. The crowd erupted in excitement, and within minutes, the great hall transformed into a festival. Massive tables were filled with exotic dishes, roasted beasts, glowing fruits, and strange bubbling drinks. Warriors clashed their cups together, some chanting battle songs, others exchanging fierce stories of conquest. Jack sat beside Xyra, eyeing a particularly suspicious-looking dish. What exactly is this? Xyra glanced at it. It is a delicacy. The venom has been drained. Jack's eyes widened. Venom? What kind of? But before he could finish, a warrior slapped him on the back so hard he nearly fell off his seat. You are one of us now, human, the warrior bellowed. Eat, drink, and celebrate. You have won the heart of our princess. Jack gave a weak chuckle. Won, more like survived. Still, he had to admit, this place was starting to grow on him. The people were strong, fierce, and loyal. There was an energy in the air, something he had never felt back on Earth. As the feast continued, Xyra leaned toward him. There is one last matter to discuss. Jack raised an eyebrow. Already? Can't I just enjoy my possibly poisonous meal first? She ignored his sarcasm. Our bond must be proven in battle. Jack almost choked on his drink. Come again. Zyra's lips curled into a knowing smile. A true warrior's mate must stand beside them in combat. It is tradition. Jack groaned, slumping forward. Of course it is. Do not worry, she added. I will not let you die. Jack laughed dryly. Oh, thanks. That makes me feel so much better. Zyra studied him for a moment, then placed a hand over his. The warmth of her touch caught him off guard. You chose this path, Jack, but you are not alone in it. Jack stared at her hand, then up at her face. For all her strength and stubbornness, there was something else in her eyes now, something softer, something real. He squeezed her hand back. Yeah, I guess we'll figure it out together. Zyra nodded. Together. The celebration continued late into the night, but Jack barely noticed. For the first time since he crash-landed onto this crazy planet, he felt like he belonged. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving. He was truly living.